Where do you get your inspiration for books? And I mean, have you ever just seen something and be like, I have to turn that into a novel?
It's really so random. I wish I had a good, concrete, satisfying answer to this, but the answer is that it is completely random. It's just things I see on the street, and sometimes I have a weird dream or something. There really is no good answer for it, other than I just don't know. All of a sudden, a voice just starts speaking to me in my head, and I just have to sort of figure out whether or not I want to listen to it and how strong it is.
What profession do you think you'd be in if you weren't a writer?
I would love to be a baker. I love to cook. I love to bake. I don't really love to cook that much. That's probably what I would do. I also would love to be a yoga teacher, but that would mean I'd have to be a yogi that doesn't really suck. So I love both of those.
What's your typical writing day like? I mean, do you devote a certain amount of time, morning, night? Do you have a routine?
It's very different. It really depends on the crucial thing being if I actually have a deadline. If I have a deadline, then I have a very structured day. And I get up in the morning, I go to yoga, and then I go write. And I write until I reach a certain word count, and then pick up and repeat the next day. And right now I don't have any kind of deadline, so I'm sort of all over the place. It's very challenging to get focused and to stay on track. But it gives me very self-discipline, which I'm not so great at. So it's a struggle all the time. But the benefit is that I get to do what I really love doing.
What was the process of getting your first book published like, from, finishing it to actually seeing it in print?
Well, the first book I wrote was never published. Nor was the second book I ever published. It was actually the third book that I wrote. And what had happened is actually the fourth book that I'd written three books that had been rejected. And at that point, I was just pretty much just thinking, this will never happen. I give up. I can't do this, obviously. And I started writing a book that was just for me. I thought there was no chance it would ever be published. And the character was very difficult, and I just wrote it for my own pleasure. And that's the one that ended up being published. That was the Gingerbread. And yeah, so it was very surprising that was the book that ended up getting published, because I tried so hard before that, and it was only when I sort of threw in the towel and assumed like it wasn't going to happen, I was just going to write a book for my own pleasure, that it actually worked out.
Do you have a favorite among your own books?
I don't. I mean, I love each one individually for its own reasons, and each one that I can pull out, I can remember that particular stage of life that I lived through while writing it. So they're special to me each. I mean, I think definitely You Know Where to Find Me is probably the one that I feel the most and understand the most. And I love the Sid Charisse book because I love that character so much. I love Nick and Nora because it was just such a joy to collaborate like that for the first time, and it was such an unexpected experience. But I love them all for different reasons.
What was the experience doing a collaboration book like? Was it different than you expected? Did you enjoy? Well, I mean, I'm guessing you enjoyed it since you've done a few subsequent ones.
It was very unexpected. I mean, it was just a random idea. I knew David as a friend, and I happened to say to him at lunch one time, I have this idea for a book, but I need a male voice for it. Would you be interested? And he said, sure. But I didn't really think anything would ever come of it, mostly because I was too lazy. But luckily he wasn't. He ended up writing the first chapter a few months later, and he sent it to me, and we just clicked right away. It was just, there was never any discussion about anything. I just picked right up and kept going, and that's the way it's been ever since. It was very, very easy, but it was a lot of luck in a lot of ways, because I can think, in retrospect, knowing what I know now, I think that I could have tried it with a lot of other people, and it wouldn't have worked out so well. Our chemistry just happened to be right, and that worked out.
You have the kind of shrimp trilogy, and you've also had books that are just standalone. What makes you decide that you want to continue a character story into other books?
It's mostly if a voice is still talking to me. I mean, Sid Charisse, that character, was so strong and so alive to me that I didn't intend to write a sequel, but she just kept having things to say. So I just kept writing her. Same with the character from the Steps.
What are some of your contemporary favorite young adult authors?
There's so many I like, so I hate to single anyone out because I don't want to offend anybody. But the authors that I love the most are usually the ones that I hang out with the most, and those are Patricia McCormick and Jacqueline Moriarty, Melissa Cantor, Megan McCafferty. That's just skimming the surface, but those are some of my favorites.
Because sometimes teen books, especially, are under the microscope as far as censorship, do you ever feel pressure to keep certain subjects or language or anything like that out of your books, or
I don't feel pressure for that. I mean, I feel very much an awareness that it gets scrutinized, and I feel a responsibility to, if I'm going to say something, however I'm going to say it, to be true to the characters and not to ever talk down to my readers, to make sure that the characters are as alive as they want to be and they're as difficult or whatever. They're going to be whoever they're going to be without me passing judgment on them, because I know so many other people later will pass judgment on them. I feel like me as the author, it's not my job to do that. It's just my job to let their voice come through and to do it as responsibly as I can. But I don't want to pass judgment on whatever it is, the choices that they make.
what advice would you have to an aspiring young adult author?
I always say you just can never read enough. Read everything you can get your hands on and change it up. Read young adult novels, read nonfiction, read newspapers, anything you can read. And while you're reading, especially when you're reading whatever genre it is that you think that you're interested in writing yourself, try to take a moment to analyze why it works. Really think about it and dissect it. Analyze it for yourself. And I think that's the best way to learn to write.
Could you see yourself ever doing an adult novel?
I used to think that I would, and it used to be a priority for me, but it's just sort of slipped away. It just doesn't interest me on any level anymore, which isn't to say it won't at some point, but right now, not at all.
Could you say a little about your new book, which is coming out in October?
It's called Dash and Lily's Book of Dares, and it's also with David Levithan, and it's about two teenagers in New York. I describe it as the Home Alone meets Nick and Nora. They're both stranded in New York City over the Christmas holidays, and they exchange a red notebook of dares through their favorite bookstore, and they sort of send each other off on a scavenger hunt throughout the city at Christmas time.